Congratulations on making it this far in the training. We continue in this lesson with statistical functions. Google Sheets provides an array of useful statistical functions. Let us begin with some of the more basic yet extremely powerful functions. Honestly, you'll be using the basic statistical functions 90% of the time and the advanced functions only 10% of the time. We will mostly be talking about the different kinds of count functions here. These are very similar to other functions such as sum, max, min, and average. The first statistical function we will look at is average. It returns the average value of a given series of numbers in sheet. It is used to calculate the arithmetic mean of a specified range. For example, we can find out the average values for the last 12 months for a business. The syntax is as shown. First is the equal to sign, followed by the function name, which is average, and then the argument in brackets. This function takes multiple arguments. These are value 1, which is required, value 2, which is optional, and so on. Value 1 is the first number, cell, or range to find the average for, and value 2 and so on are any additional numbers, cells, or ranges to include in the calculation. A maximum of 255 numbers is allowed. To illustrate the use of the average function, let us consider an example. Let's say we want to find the average of the amount of items sold. We begin by selecting a destination cell. We'll go with C10. We start entering our formula by typing equal to, followed by average and our argument in parentheses. For our argument, we'll select the range for amount, which is C3 to C9. Finally, we hit enter to commit. Notice how Google Sheets offered to autocomplete our formula when we started typing. Using AI, Sheets was able to determine the range we wanted to calculate, and even suggested some functions we might want to use for the calculation. If the suggestion from Sheets works for you, as in this case, press Tab to accept and autofill. Next is the AVERAGEIF function. This calculates the average of a range if a given criteria is met. The function takes 3 arguments and the syntax is as shown. The first argument is the range that will be checked using the criteria to be specified. The next argument is the criteria the first argument must meet for the average function to take effect. And the last argument is the range to perform the average calculation on. The criteria used for AVERAGEIF can include logical operators for exact matching or wildcards for partial matching. Let's illustrate the use of this function with some examples. First, we will calculate the average of all values in the range C3 to C9 that are greater than 40. Here, we did not specify the third argument, the average range, so Sheets use the criteria range as the average range. Next, we will calculate the average of all values in the range C3 to C9 if the corresponding cells in the range B3 to B9 contain exactly book. To do this, we select B3 to B9 as our criteria range, type in equal to 3A as our criterion, and select C3 to C9 as our average range. Lastly, we will calculate the average of all values in the range C3 to C9 if the corresponding cells in the range B3 to B9 do not contain exactly eraser. To do this, we select B3 to B9 as our criteria range, type in less than, greater than 3A as our criterion, and select C3 to C9 as our average range. AVERAGEIFS is similar to AVERAGEIF. It also returns the average, that is the arithmetic mean, of all numbers in a range of cells based on a criteria. But AVERAGEIFS takes multiple criteria rather than just one. As a result, its syntax is a little different. The syntax is as shown here. The main difference is that the average range argument now comes first, followed by the criteria range and then the criterion. The criteria range and the criterion then repeat for as many criteria as you want to test for. Let's look at an example. Here, we want to calculate the average of all values in the range C3 to C9 if the grade, so the range D3 to D9, is A, and the item, which is B3 to B9, is a pen. The syntax will therefore be as shown. The count function counts cells that contain numeric data. Numeric data here includes negative numbers, percentages, dates, times, fractions, and formulas that return numbers. Empty cells and text values are ignored. Its syntax is as shown. The argument, that is value 1, value 2, and so on, can be cell references or values typed into the count formula. The following count function example returns the number of numbers in the range A3 to A9. To count the number of individual items, including text data, use the COUNTA function. It has the same syntax as count, only the function name changes. Use the COUNTIF function to count cells only if a condition is satisfied. COUNTIF takes two arguments, as can be seen from the syntax. These are the range, which is the range that is tested, as well as counted, and the criterion, which is the logical test to be carried out. Let's look at an example of the function in use. In our example, we want to count the number of items whose amount is greater than 40. So we select the cell where we want to display our result, in this case cell C4. Then we call the function COUNTIF and select our cell range C3 to C9 as our range argument. We add a criterion greater than 40 and hit enter. This returns 4, meaning there are 4 items whose amount are greater than 40. COUNTIFS works in the same way as COUNTIF, except that it takes multiple criteria. The COUNTBLANK function counts the number of empty cells in a range. Cells that contain text, numbers, errors, spaces, and others are not counted, but formulas that return empty text are counted. The syntax is as shown. It takes multiple arguments, value 1, value 2, and so on. These are the cells or ranges to be evaluated and counted. Only value 1 is required. The other arguments are optional. Let's look at an example of the COUNTBLANK function. First of all, let's select where we want to display our result. We will go with E3. Then we call our function COUNTBLANK and select the range C3 to C9 as our argument. We press enter to execute. This will return 2 because there are 2 empty cells in this range. The large function will return the nth largest number in a selected range when we specify which nth position we want. To do this, the large function first sorts the cell range in descending order but does not display it. It then picks the corresponding nth largest value as specified. The syntax is as shown. The 2 arguments this function takes are the range, which is the array or range to consider, and the rank, which is the position of the value we want after the data has been sorted in descending order. Let's look at an example of this. Here, we want to display the largest amount, so our rank is 1, since the first largest amount is the biggest. Let's select the cell E3 as the cell where we want to display our result. Then, we call the large function, select C3 to C9 as our range argument, and type 1 as our rank. The function returns 90 when we hit enter, since 90 is the largest value in the range of cells we selected. Likewise, if we want to find the second largest value in the list, we will use the same approach and change 1 to 2. This will return 69.213 since that is the second largest number in that range. The rank function returns the rank of a numeric value when compared to a list of other numeric values. Rank can rank values from largest to smallest, like in finding the top sales, as well as smallest to largest, like in finding the fastest time. Rank includes 2 mandatory arguments and 1 optional argument. These are value, which is the value or number we want to find the rank for. This is required. then data, which is the range of numbers to compare the first argument value to. This is also required. And lastly, there is ascending, which indicates whether the ranking should be in ascending or descending order. This is optional. Type 0 for descending and 1 for ascending. If nothing is supplied for this argument, the default is descending order. Let's see how the rank function can be used with an example. In our example, we want to know the position of the amount in cell C3 relative to the other amount. First of all, we select E3 and call the rank function. We select C3 as our value and C3 to C9 as our data. We will use absolute referencing for the data since we intend on applying it to the other rows. The function returns 6 when we press enter, meaning the amount in C3 is the 6th largest. The max function returns the largest value from the numbers provided, either in a range or an array. The syntax is as shown. Max takes multiple arguments, value 1, value 2, and so on. Only the first argument is required. The arguments are the numbers or ranges to consider. Let's see how we can return the largest number in the amount column of our sample data. We will select cell E3 and call the max function. We then select C3 to C9 as our first argument and press enter. This will return 90, which is the largest number in that range. If we want to know the smallest number in a numeric range, we will use the min function. This is the opposite of the max function. It has a similar syntax. The only thing that changes is the function name. Let's use the min function to return the smallest amount in our sample data. We'll type our formula in E3. We begin by calling the min function, selecting C3 to C9 as our value 1 argument. This will return 28.78, which is the smallest number in the range. And with that, we come to the end of this lesson. Next up is text functions.